I think everyone's come to thanks everyone for joining us. We're glad that we're able to connect to everyone through these Friday night conversations. So Friday night conversations are hosted by us at Compartment S4, and we are a design collaborative of 8 architects. We decided to do these conversations, realizing the strong gaps between academics and practice. And it's been great so far. We've been able to rope in a number of practitioners and researchers from different places to talk about topics that we align with and feel that require a collective analysis. So Aman, do you want to just introduce today's FNC and Vishwanath?
Yeah, sure. Hello everyone. Hope you're all keeping well. With the COVID pandemic and the more recent cyclone Tote that has hit us, I think like one cannot afford to turn a blind eye to climate change and the impact our lifestyle choices have had on the planet we so fondly call ours. So I believe today's guest is someone who believes in action towards betterment and has actively been working towards the same. For today's FNC, we have with us S. Vishwanath, Director of Biome Solutions and the founder of Rainwater Club. Vishwanath is a civil engineer and an urban regional planner based in Bangalore, whose practice is deep-rooted in interweaving urban policies, cyclic resource management with community knowledge and livelihood generation. In today's conversation, he takes us through his explorations and findings of relationships between a metropolis and water. His work and methods have been encouraging to many, and we're very glad to have him with us here today. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite Vishwanath to share his experiences with us. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, most welcome. Let me share my screen first and then my experiences later. Is the voice clear?
Yeah,
it's good. Okay. So this is sort of a photography-rich slide, and thanks Aman and Vedanti for getting me a dry run yesterday. So that's the first time I've ever done a dry run before I'm doing an actual presentation the next day. So S4 is teaching an old dog new tricks. So thanks for that. And so here's how it will go. I got some photographs and some ideas and some experience that I want to share. I hope to be talking for no more than 40 minutes, and that's already a human rights violation. Apologies for that. And then I look forward to the interaction. Now, what we do during the interaction is that we can go back to any one of the slides or any one of those ideas and discuss it at length or whatever the time permits. Right? So let me start off. And I'm going to talk more about Bangalore, the city I occupy, and I've been residing for the last 30 years now, and look at its relationships with water and wastewater. And this is just a sort of a synopsis of how urban India and urban cities are looking at relationships with water and wastewater, right? So therefore I call it city and hinterland relationships, design and informal, right? So this is the land of rivers, this excellent graphics by Robert Sus. Gets us the river basins, the tributaries, the veins and arteries of India. And one of the imaginations of modern water management is to work on river basins, and those river basins are captured here. So every city and every habitation has to locate itself in a river basin and be interactive with the river basin. So that dialogue is important. It's not happening enough. Already the dialogue with local waters is not happening, but the dialogue with the river basin also is very much missing in India and in many parts of the world. So that's something that we need to focus on as we go along. So always begin a Friday evening talk with a profound quote or a not so profound quote. Ideally, I'm having coffee, but Friday evenings are meant for better things, but we'll have it, we'll do it later. But let's keep this in mind. Those who not learn from history are condemned to repeat it. And one of the things about history is that it's really old. History is not 200 or 300 or 500 years old, but really, really old. In the present context, why we need to talk about history is, in a sense, history is destiny and geology is destiny. What we are confronted with in Bangalore, for example, is in 2018, the think tank Niti Aayog saying that we're going to run out of drinking water by 2020, right? And BBC going to town saying that we're going to run out of water by 2020. That will be the next Cape Town, right? So these are the kind of doomsday Cassandras going about their business with hopefully some form of research and some form of data. Luckily, we haven't run out of water by 2020 in Bangalore. We still have enough water. Continues to remain everything, the monsoon, right? And we're expecting him on May 31st this year, according to the IMD. What we have done is better understand the weather, better understand climate change. And our predictions, for example, with the cyclone that hit Saurashtra and Gujarat was pretty bang accurate. We knew about 3 days before that the cyclone is coming and it's going to hit at this particular point. And that's where it hit, right? So our tracking ability has increased phenomenally. Though the monsoon itself has a complex weather system, we're still not able to granularly understand it. It is everything, right? Now, when we dive down to cities, this is the famous Raghurai classic photograph of Agrasen Ki Baudi in Lutyens, Delhi, heart of Lutyens, Delhi, now being remodified. But here you see this young man, young lad, who's also the watchman of that place for some time, diving into waters. Notice the waters, notice the high-rise building at the background. Notice it now, thanks to the ASI, this has been retained, the heritage remains, the skeleton remains, the soul is gone. And we don't ask what happened to the waters as much as we should. Some people must ask it, but sometimes people are busy taking selfies. So it's not really that important to ask what happened to the groundwater. What happened here was that the high-rise buildings and the buildings around exploited groundwater. More importantly, the metro which came in, put in a station which was 3 to 4 stories below the ground. And for it to not get flooded, it started to pump out the aquifer and throw the water out because for it was a nuisance. And so therefore, urban infrastructure, especially roads and things like metros and underground cables, do not talk to aquifers and do not talk to surface water. This conversation between roads and hydrology and underground work like metros with the aquifer is also missing in the master plans that we develop for our cities, the land use plans that we develop for our cities, and the building bylaws that we develop for our cities. So as architects, designers, and urban planners, somewhere we'll have to start this dialogue going if water is a scarce resource and if water has to be protected. And as I'll make the point, especially aquifers and groundwater become very important to realize how much of it is there, what's the quality, what is the quantity, and how to protect it, right? And because this is an ancient history, and this is the Ashokan edict at Dhauli, Kalinga, near Bhubaneswar now. This edict, 230 BC, thereabouts, says plant trees, dig wells. And dig wells is a metaphor that I will dive into from the water perspective. Because with the wells we've dug, we've also made the best of architecture, right? And I don't have to tell architects about the beautiful step wells. This is the deepest in the world, Chand Paudi in Rajasthan. This civilization has also been privy to the disappearance of a river in its living memory, in its oral history, right? So the Saraswati, which is referred to in the Nadi Stuti Sukta 72 times, more times than the Ganga, is being there as part of the Rig Veda, is no longer that magnificent one that she's described in the Rig Veda. So the question is out in terms of archaeology, in terms of remote sensing, in terms of all the sciences that we have to try and figure out when did the Saraswati disappear? What happened to the first urban civilization, which was around the Sindhu and the Saraswati? Where did it go? The Aryan theory, the non-Aryan theory, these are matters of debate still going on, sometimes political, sometimes not. But so far as things go, in the living memory of our people, a river has disappeared. Perhaps due to climate change, perhaps due to river capture, perhaps due to tectonic activity, or perhaps to a combination of all three. Good to remember that rivers can disappear and with it civilizations can disappear. Though it was next to the, it's named after this Indus Valley civilization as it was called, or now referred to as the Harappan civilization or the Harappan Saraswati civilization, the means of drawing water was not from the river. Dholavira had rainwater harvesting systems. Mohenjo-daro, every third house had a well. Lothal had a good drainage system. This is a picture from Lothal, and a well to draw water from. And why was the well important? Because the well filtered the water from the river, was a steady place for supply of water, and it gave you clean water at your doorstep. So the science of digging for wells is a very old one. The wells themselves have a 10,000-year-old history. The oldest wells are about 9,000 BC, right? So that's how it is dated, and it's there in part of our history. Now coming to history as destiny. For my city, as many other cities, we have to get local and understand what happened millions of years ago. So we have rock outcrops in Lal Bagh, which is one of the biggest parks in Bangalore, which is dated roughly 3,500 million years old. And what happened 3,500 million years old and before that? The uplift of the rocks, the volcanic activity which caused Bangalore to go up to 920 meters above sea level, which gave us the weathered rock layer and the hard rock layer where the aquifer now stands, which holds water, which made for a fact that there's no perennial river flowing in the city, is a 3,500 million year old history. Also interesting for us as a city and for many other cities that to find out their histories for themselves is about 100 million years ago, Madagascar separated from the Indian plate. And as the Indian plate moved into the Asian plate and caused the Himalayas to rise, it also caused the Gangetic Basin to sink. And what happened in the Gangetic Basin is we created, because of that sinking of that geological activity, and then the silt distribution which came through the monsoon rains hitting the Himalayas, one of the most fertile regions of the world in a continuous history. So the Indo-Gangetic Basin has an extremely high concentration of population since time immemorial, right? Since agricultural civilization began. And that fact will hit us or will impact us now, because as these cities will, these areas will now urbanize, we will have very high density of population in already dense regional areas. That's something that history has given us and geology has given us. For Bangalore, the figure on the right shows you a place called Coimbatore, and just above Coimbatore is a blue ribbon of rain-bearing clouds and water coming in. That's the famous Palghat Gap. So what happens in April and May, and as I speak right now outside, is that the winds from the Arabian Sea blow through this Palghat Gap and drift up north to Bangalore, which is at the highest point, and it rains in May. And we have the summer rains of 111 millimeters in Bangalore, which helps us to harvest rainwater and how to manage the water requirements of a landscape. This is an accident of history, 100 million years old. A more recent history comes from the British occupying cities and starting cantonments. The first effort towards piped water supply and piped sewerage starts with the British coming in. Of course, till now, the germ theory of disease is not found. Pasteur has to go about identifying bacteria, and then the germ theory of disease starts in the 1850s. Then starts the emphasis on piped water supply and sewage systems. Also, famine and drought is a constant occurrence in the Indian subcontinent. In Bangalore, for 3 years, the rains fail. The famed 1,000 lakes of Bangalore dry up. There's no water, there's no food. About 1 lakh of people die. Nearly 100,000 people die in the old Mysore kingdom. The Mysore kingdom's population is about 3 lakhs to 3.5 lakhs. So 20 to 25% of the people die because of famine and drought. And this has a profound impact on the governance mechanism. The British set up the Famine Commission, but the local kings also set up some system of getting permanent water to the city, and the focus then starts to become that our lakes and our local waters is not enough during drought times, and we have to get piped water supply coming in from far. This is the famine, and this is Bangalore city, that people are dying. So the first piped water supply scheme starts, and in 1894, the city of Bangalore gets water from about 22 kilometers away, a place called Esarghatta, and it uses steam engines to bring water to the city. So steam engines and firewood-based steam engines are used to pump water in. The local water systems like the lakes and tanks and the wells no longer are relevant because piped water is coming into every house and it's bringing 55 liters per capita per day from a source far away. There begins the destruction of local water bodies, surface water bodies, because there's no relationship now. Plus, the piped water supply is also throwing out sewage or wastewater, which is not managed, and this ends up in our local water bodies. So this is how the reservoir looks like. Unfortunately, this is one of the better scenes when there's water. Right now, it's dry. And the water supply and city is linked in a strange fashion. So the city struggles for water. An infrastructure scheme is thought of. Water comes into the city. Now there's plenty of water, and then the city population increases to consume the water, and you go through a sinus curve, oversupply and lack of supply. And this is a particular phenomenon of urban infrastructure, because water supply schemes are designed for 20 years for a projected population. Unfortunately, 20 or 30 years comes way too sooner than anticipated, and the population consumes the water. And then by the time you package the finances for the next water supply scheme, you find that there's a trough and there's a scarcity of water. So people start to weep about lack of water in our cities till the next major infrastructure comes in, and then it goes on like that. The other major pandemic which had a phenomenal impact was the plague. 1896 to 1899, it came to Bombay, and then it came to Bangalore. The plague started the first town planning, serious efforts at town planning, and the first efforts at sewage and sewerage systems. So the sewage system started to come in during this particular era in a more bigger fashion. And somewhere along the line, we started to create specialized institutions to manage water and sanitation, because the local governments were no longer capable of throwing in the engineering skills needed to manage water which was coming from great distances and wastewater which was flowing great distances. Right? Now, the Kaveri is the source. The Kaveri River for Bangalore is 100 kilometers away and 300 meters below the city. So the first specialized water supply and sanitation institution in independent India was the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board, 1964, followed by the Chennai Water Sewerage Board, the Delhi Jal Board, and so on and so forth. Mumbai continued to have the local corporation. Ahmedabad continues to have the local body governing its water supply. There's no specialized institution. So here's the river basin and the city. Up north on the ridge line stands Bangalore. 1/3 of Bangalore is in the Kaveri Basin. 2/3 of Bangalore is in something called the Dakshin Pinakini Basin. The river is far away. The catchment is large to manage the waters for the river, and therefore water has to come from the river 100 kilometers and 300 meters up, right? Like so. So there are 4 major reservoirs in the Kaveri in Karnataka. These 4 reservoirs, of which 2 are described and shown on the left, the KRS reservoir near Mysore and the Kaveri reservoir. These get full, and from here, the water is let out from the dam to flow in the river, another about 50-60 kilometers. To the figure in the right, from a place called Torekad in Halli, TK Halli, water is then taken in a canal and pumped up through 3 stages to reach the city of Bangalore. It takes 2 units of energy to get 1 kiloliter or 1,000 liters of water to the city. The cost of water to Bangalore is one of the highest in India. It's 95 rupees a kiloliter, 95 rupees a 1,000 liters. That's the capital cost, operation and maintenance cost, and something called a sinking fund to replace the pipes and tanks, right? So the entire catchment of the Kaveri upstream in the Karnataka area is managed for the dams to be full and water to Bangalore being assured, because that's drinking water supply. Right? So the city is linked with the catchment is very strong. Unless it rains in the forests of the Western Ghats, in Kodagu and in Kerala, Bangalore's water dependency is a question mark. Right? Technology also plays a major part, and I just want to throw light on the bigger picture of water in India. The hard rock drilling rig comes in mid-1960s. About 17 of them or 18 of them are first imported by UNICEF of all organizations. They come from Denmark, they come from UK, and they come from the United States. But the first one comes from the UK. It's called the Halcro. This is put up in the Pune office of the Groundwater Survey and Development Authority, GSDA. This is able to drill into hard rock. You put in a hand pump, which is the Mark II hand pump invented in India, and this starts to provide water, drinking water to everybody who have been hit by famine and drought. The 60s is a period of drought, right? So the hard rock drilling rig is the advent of the first drilling technology which can go deep. Of course, in the typical Jugaad mentality, Tiruchengode in Tamil Nadu becomes the mecca of the hard rock drilling rigs. We start to make rigs which can go to 2,000 feet or 3,000 feet now. And we start to export these rigs, and the rigs go everywhere. What was meant to provide drinking water now enters the agricultural arena. There is free power supply, there's deeper and deeper competitive drilling, and you start to exploit groundwater at unprecedented scales. To such an extent that we now have something like 33 million wells and bore wells. 65% of our total water requirement comes from groundwater. 85% of our drinking water needs. 50% of urban water supply, that's not mentioned here. 50% of urban water supply comes from groundwater. We extract 250 cubic kilometers, which is more than China and USA combined together. Number 2 and number 3 combined extract 220, we extract about 250. We are the world's largest user of groundwater, and our dependency on groundwater is phenomenal, and the only source of recharge is rain, which we need to remember. Now, of course, treated wastewater also. So if there is one point that I want to convey to you and discuss with you is India's knowledge of hydrogeology will be crucial to its sustainable water use. And without understanding the geology and the aquifers and the methods of recharge and keeping the groundwater quantity and quality alive, we will struggle. There is an impact on our rivers because most of our rivers will dry up if the groundwater table falls because they will not be fed during summer by groundwater. Many of the streams in India are fed by groundwater from springs and from groundwater. And with groundwater depleting, rivers will also dry, except during a few days in the monsoon, right? We also have the most oldest canal irrigation system in the world, the most extensive. Started with the British. Sir Proby Cotley and Sir Arthur Cotton are legendary names. There's even a temple to Sir Arthur Cotton. His photograph is hung in the homes of farmers in Andhra Pradesh, along with the gods. And he's worshipped, and there's an annual pilgrimage to his, which his birthday was very recent, about 10 days back, where people go and worship him. So people who've brought irrigation water have been worshipped in India. Canal irrigation was one such phenomenon. The first engineering college in India was started at Roorkee, and it was designed to train engineers in canal building and dam building, canal building especially, and that tradition has continued. Our engineers are specialists in building canals and dams. We also have the largest watershed program in the world, which is soil and conservation works. We have the single largest dependency of borewells. So we have a number of firsts in regard to water in India, right? And why are our rivers dry? One of them I explained to you is groundwater tables falling. But then the population increase has already obviously plays a role, not a very significant role, but definitely a role. Food grain production, especially high yielding variety of grains, wheat and rice, which take 2 to 3 times more water than the local varieties. And then the explosion in the food security. I mean, we got to be food secure. We were paranoid about food security. After the Green Revolution, we got the food security at a considerable cost to the soil, but also to water. And electricity generation has been one of the key consumers of water, right? And just as an example, we are also building dams at a large scale, 300 or so dams during independence, 5,800 now. 2017 is a slightly older figure, 5,800, near about that in 2021. Under construction or being built. And just as an example, wheat alone, high yielding variety, we went from 10.4 to 107 million tons. So we substituted the cereals, millets and others, bajra, ragi and others with wheat and rice to a large extent. That has had an impact on water consumption, and now therefore our rivers dry up. So when we get to urban India, we ask ourselves the question, how much water is required by an urban Indian? And this is a question which has not yet been answered, because we have designed network projects designed for 135 liters, 150 liters, or 200 liters per person per day. And we have an old BIS standard which suggests 135 liters per capita per day. We don't have a normal one. However, we need to start to work out our own standards, and perhaps it should be closer to 100 or lesser than 100 per capita per day. That should be the standard that we should aim for, because higher standard means higher project costs and higher water consumption. So what do we do as architects and urban designers and planners, right, at a site? So even if we take a small site to a large city, the resource remains the same. The resource is rainwater, essentially that. Soil moisture, because soil is one of the largest holders of water in the Indian subcontinent and even at a site level. Surface water, which is obviously our lakes, ponds, and rivers. Groundwater, which is our aquifers. Piped water for cities, which comes from far distances from a dam or a reservoir usually. And then there is reclaimed water, that is used water or wastewater. So in each site, we can think through these 6 components of water and try to optimize it in terms of efficiency, in terms of reuse, and in terms of harvesting rainwater. So just a diagram in Bangalore context, what happens on an unbuilt site and on a built site. In an unbuilt site, when it rains, 85% of the water is held in the soil layer up to 1 meter deep, and it either evaporates or evapotranspires. Bushes, shrubs, and trees take away the water and put it back into the air. 10% of it runs off. This is a flat site that I assume in the Bangalore context with 970 millimeters of rain. It varies from city to city and geography to geography. Only about 3 to 8% of the rainwater that falls annually recharges the aquifer. The moment you build upon it to the right, the runoff now becomes 95% or 100% actually. So we have transformed the basic hydrology of a small unit of land. We've transformed it at watershed scale. We've transformed it at city scale. The whole idea with rainwater harvesting, therefore, becomes biomimicry. Can we go back to the hydrological cycle before building on the site? Can we make use of that 85% of evapotranspiration water? Can we either hold on to it in some tanks or in the aquifer and use it and then leave it as treated wastewater for it to go back to the atmosphere? That's the trick with rainwater harvesting. So what we've done in Bangalore is created a bylaw based on the rainfall pattern you see on the right. And it's not just the monthly rainfall pattern, but we also looked at the daily rainfall pattern and the intensity of rains. And the policy suggests, and the bylaw makes it mandatory, that every house and every institution, building, will have to harvest 60 liters per square meter of roof area and 30 liters per square meter of paved area around the building. And if you leave areas unpaved, you don't have to harvest the water. And the minimum depth, if you make a recharge structure like a well, which you see on the bottom, which is 1 meter in diameter, should be 3 meters, a minimum. And the idea is that you go through the compacted soil layer, you go into a layer where you can put the water in and it will be absorbed by the aquifer. So bylaws, policies will have to evolve based on the context of the rainfall in a particular city, the characteristics of the aquifer, and the patterns of consumption in the city. Each city will have to evolve its own building bylaws for rainwater harvesting, right? And so that can be done scientifically, broadly. So that's the law to the left, which I explained to you. And this is a mother of all rain barrels. One way of harvesting rainwater is to pick it up from the rooftop, filter it, and stock it up in these rain barrels and reuse it, right? Depending on the quality of the catchment surface and the filtration you do, you can use it for many purposes. And I'll explain some to you. The other thing to do is to look at the hydrology and the hydrogeology of our cities. For us in Bangalore, a ridge line runs through the city. What happens is there's a ridge line you see on the dotted line. To the left, you see that it's dendritic and the flow is from north to south. To the right, it's more from west to east and it's more gradual. So what happens is the lakes to the right of the ridge line are shallow and wide, whereas the lakes to the left of the ridge line are smaller and deeper. The runoff on the left is very fast. The rainwater drains away quickly, but on the right, you have much slower runoff, so therefore flooding occurs much more on the right of the ridge line. So these are typical characteristics of every city, which we'll have to understand when we design. And we'll have to place the sites that we design, the buildings we design in this particular bigger map to figure out what will be the impact of the overall larger environment on our sites too, right, as we design things. In Bangalore, we also have a traditional livelihood-based community, which is called the Manvadar or the Ode community, who have been digging wells for 1,000 years, right? All across India, they're called Ode in Gujarat, Rajasthan, they've been digging in Kashmir all the way to Tamil Nadu. They know how to dig, how deep to dig, how wide to dig, and how to access water through traditional knowledge. So can traditional knowledge be used with modern designs of rainwater harvesting? Can these people get a livelihood where they make recharge wells, pick up rooftop rainwater or stormwater, filter it and push it into the aquifer? It's an endeavor which we are pursuing in Bangalore. We think that we can get 1 million wells in Bangalore, and 1 million wells will harvest half of the rain that falls on Bangalore and will create another river below us so that we'll be able to access more groundwater. That's one thing. This is how the system is done. On the left, you see the rooftop rainwater coming in. The blue drum is a filter with charcoal and sand. It filters in and then goes into the well. The well is covered with a blue tarpaulin. To the right, you see the recharge well, 1 meter in diameter and 6 meters deep, where again the rooftop rainwater is filtered and pushed in. In both cases, the well supplies water to the families throughout the year. We found that more than 10,000 such wells exist in Bangalore, which still continue to provide water. We want to expand that from those zones of where the wells are present, right? So we can work on the hydrogeology. The difference is that the well water costs 75 paisa to 1 rupee a kiloliter. 1 rupee a kiloliter, 1,000 liters, compared to 95 rupees for water from the Kaveri. Right? So local water, local recharge makes economic sense and energy sense. The carbon emissions are also less for this water to be pumped. It takes 0.1 unit of energy for a well water to reach the overhead tank. It takes 2 units of energy for the water from the Kaveri to come to the cities. So there is a climate change benefit also. So what can we do? We can be water conscious as ourselves in individual homes, use water efficient fixtures, focus on gardening because we consume a heck of a lot of water, use eco-friendly soaps and detergents because we are flushing out a lot of chemicals into our sewage treatment plants, which becomes more and more difficult to clean up. Look at food habits, eat locally grown food. We all know that because locally grown food has the lowest water footprint. Look at conserving energy because energy and water are linked, and meters and pricing is the best way of understanding how much we are consuming, and pricing sends the best signal for conserving water, right? So for example, you use the Rita nut and you can make your own soaps, detergents, and shampoos. And the Ras for this long hair is that Rita which you grow. What you do is also plant Rita trees on your cities so that you're able to ensure livelihoods for people who collect the nuts and then sell it to the market. And so everything is integrated. And this is what can be done at a local level. And you use showers and aerators. I'll go quickly with case studies now. Examples of a single house which can be designed to be water efficient, right? What's happening here is this is our house, and Susi, we got a basement. You see a recharge well at the left. The basement is there. The basement provides the earth for making the whole house, right? And therefore, the house does not require an AC. It doesn't even require a fan. Now that we have a dog with a fur coat, we need a fan. Otherwise, we don't need that too. So designs can start to working at 3-dimensional level in managing water. I'll show you some ideas before it. This is the basement, solar lighting. table tennis table. Penhold grip is preferred over a handshake grip. The Chinese play with a penhold grip, and penhold grip gives you a great deal of advantage in an attack form, right? So if you're going to play TT, use a penhold grip. And that's the sort of drawing room level. You see that there's no fan or AC or something of that sort, open house, just to give you a flavor. And this is where I'm sitting right now talking, the floor on the left with the mezzanine. What does it mean? It means that you're conserving energy, and if you conserve energy, you're saving water. You get a rain gauge on the roof to measure the rainfall. You get it at a site level detail. The green thing on the right is a rain gauge, right? This is how the rain barrels work on the roof. You get a wide roof, which bounces off the heat, but it's also easily cleanable. And the water that you collect from this white roof, which is the staircase room, is collected in the rain barrel on the right. This is called lifeline water. It provides us our drinking and cooking water requirement for the whole year. Just a 500-liter barrel provides us drinking and cooking water for the whole year without any treatment. We don't even need a filter, forget a RO system or anything of that sort, just because the rooftop is clean, right? So you see the cleanliness of the roof and the cleanliness of the water. Right now it's raining, my rain barrel is full. I just try to get down 20 liters and it'll last me 2 days or 3 days, right? The small bottle you see on the right is called the H2s Yl Test. It's a simple test to check for bacterial contamination in water. You pour water into the bottle and observe it for 36 hours. Stays brown, no bacteria, drink the stuff. Goes black, you have to do something about the water, right? So see, such simple tests have to be used with rainwater harvesting for us to start to use it for higher order purposes, such as drinking and cooking. So just a description of the system. We have many such rain barrels. The one in the center is used for toilet flushing. The one in the right is used for the washing machine and for having a bath, right? So for different zones, you can collect different water and use it for different purposes. Won't go too much into the details. Filters can be bought off the shelf. There are many filters now available in the market which do a very good job, or you can do a do-it-yourself like the Dhoti filter on the left, or what I'll show you on the right, which is a charcoal filter. So you just use charcoal and limestone and you push the rainwater through it, and then it gets cleaned up and all the silt gets collected there and the water gets stored in your sump tank and you pump it up and use it, right? So this is how it's stored in the sump tank. A sump tank is mandatory in Bangalore because we get water twice or thrice in a week. So everybody has a sump tank. The same sump tank used for the water utility can be used for rainwater harvesting. So you don't have to invest additional cost, right? And that's how it looks like when it's covered. So I'll go a bit fast, and there's a recharge well right in front of the house with a small bowl of water for the animals and birds. You've got to think about not only yourself, but also the biodiversity around you. Reptiles, mammals have a right to life as much as you do in an urban area. This is a grey water recycling system. It's called a reed bed system. What you see on the top left is these ferro cement tanks, one after the other. You pump in grey water. That's the water you collect from your washing machine and from the bath. You pump it into the first one, and then by gravity it goes through those 4 ferro cement tanks at the back. Then it gets collected in these black tanks called the Kaveri tanks. And this water can then be used for many purposes. It can be used for gardening, the terrace gardening, or it can be used for flushing the conventional toilet below, right? So this simple grey water treatment systems also become useful in a city context. EcoSand is something that's a favorite of ours, separating urine and solids. And then the urine is diluted and used as a fertilizer. The solids is composted. This is how a pan looks like. We got the first pan in 2003 from China. It was quite a wonderful journey through customs to explain what the hell this device was all about. It involved a lot of squatting, but it also involved a lot of merriment. What it shows on the right is a dalda dabba. And these youngsters won't know what dalda means, but a lot of us old people will know what dalda means. It's vanaspati. It's lined with paper. So therefore, when the solids go, you cover it with ash or you cover it with sawdust, and in the barrel goes the urine. Urine, whenever it's full, you just transfer it to a large drum. The urine can be diluted and applied directly to plants. Dilution should be 1:5 to 1:8. Otherwise, the plants will die. It's very rich in NPK. Right? And then you can grow stuff like rice on the terrace. This is rice growing on the terrace with the compost from the EcoSand toilet and water from the grey water systems. You get 4 crops of rice, 1 kg per square meter, great productivity. You can actually transform on the rooftops. What a rooftop can do is to generate energy through solar water heaters, solar photovoltaics, generate food as in the center, generate water, treat wastewater, and be helpful in the day-to-day living. So a typical roof in Bangalore of 100 square meters can generate 100,000 liters of rainwater, can grow 200 kgs of grain and rice, recirculate 100 liters, etc., etc., etc. I described whatever it is. And then biodiversity can also be attempted because the rice that you grow, the squirrels will get to it, the birds will get to it. There'll be plenty little left for you, but that's all fine. Insect biodiversity is one which is under great stress. If there's some space provided for bees and insects, you're doing a great job for nature and biodiversity. So redesigning roofs is something within our control, and I think we should, as time goes by, provide more and more attention and hopefully have green roofs all across the city. Right? So this is a lousy job with paintbrush on the roofscapes of Bangalore, but you can do a better job with actually getting green roofs all across the city through policies, bylaws, as is being done in many cities. Right? And we can think about it. So that's an individual building. What do we do at a community level? Right? So here's a gated community, 35 acres or 37 acres, 360 plots, the one on the left, each plot roughly 30, 40 or 40, 60. Not connected to the water utilities. What would happen in this kind of a gated community is everybody would drive a bore well. The bore well's depth is 900 to 1,000 feet, costs 2 lakh rupees. 360 into 2 lakh rupees, 7.2 crore rupees. 360 straws into the same Coca-Cola bottle, each competing with the other, and pretty soon Coca-Cola bottle empty, no water, and then you depend on tankers to get your water. A rich community completely dependent on tankers is not something that they would want. So what did they do? They banned private borewells. They put 3 or 5 community borewells, now about 3 which is functioning. They shared the water. They put in a meter for every household, and they shared equally all the aquifer water. And they priced the water. They said that if you're consuming more than 20,000 liters, you're going to pay $120 a kiloliter. So they brought down demand to less than 20,000 liters. And what you see on the blue as drums on the figure are all recharge wells. So it was mandatory for every house to adopt the stormwater drain in front of it and put all the rainwater from the site and from the roads into these recharge wells. So we got about 300 recharge wells. Now it's closer to 360, I think. So now 360 straws putting Coca-Cola back into the bottle and only 3 straws drawing it, measuring it, how much is being recharged, measuring how much is being drawn, making sure that recharge is more than what is being drawn, and then investing the excess money in wastewater treatment plants, doing all the calculations. So I'm just showing you the sheet as a reference. You have to do the maths. You have to figure out how much is being consumed per capita. You have to drive down through pricing and metering the consumption to what is sustainable within the carrying capacity of that area, and then put in place those prices. And with the monies that you get, you invest in a wastewater treatment plant and you supply treated wastewater to the households so that the net fresh water becomes less. Another community which cleaned up its beautiful old open well, about 100 to 120 truckloads of silt, and gave it to the gardens for application. The well now has enough water to last for 6 months for the community. This is 70 acres. So we're talking about 36 acres, 37 acres. This is 70 acres. So gated communities like this can also attempt being self-sufficient for water, but also being net providers of water, right? What do we do at apartment scale? These are apartments near Vartur in Bangalore, 94 villas and flats. They put in place in the center recharge wells, 40 recharge wells. Unfortunately, the aquifer is very wide. So although recharge they did not benefit them much, it benefited the neighbors. That's the price that they paid for community service. The gentleman on the right, Srinivasan Shekhar, was the architect who designed the whole system. And what they did was they put meters in every flat so that every flat is measured, so you know what the consumption is. Now it is by law. It's a law that if you have a set of flats in Bangalore, more than 4, you have to have a meter, and the meter has to be read on a monthly basis. Metering and tariff is really crucial to managing water at apartment levels. It's really, really essential to do that. Otherwise, there's competitive consumption. And what TSEC did was to set in place a wastewater treatment system, which included a sand filter, an activated carbon filter, an ozonizer, and an RO system, all designed by Srinivasan Shekhar and other residents, which meant that they could take their wastewater, blend it with groundwater, and drink it. This is the first set of apartments in India that I know of, which is drinking their own treated wastewater. They've been doing it for the last 10 years now, I think, around 10 years. The Pollution Control Board has also been happy with what they have achieved, right? This is brave new India. This is where I think a lot of our cities and apartments will have to go, and we'll have to look at taking wastewater and drinking it, right? So what will the bylaws and regulations do? They'll have to mandate rainwater harvesting, wastewater recycling, groundwater management, metering in every house, and automatic switch off pumps. These are all now bylaws and policy bylaws. So I'll just share this with you. These are all mandatory. All those things that I said: rainwater harvesting, wastewater recycling, metering in every house, putting in an automatic switch on and switch off pump. Right? So let me leave that. Let me get to some of the interesting bits, which is around the ship, which is what's more interesting to me. So this can be done at larger park levels. Covered Park is a major park in Bangalore, 220 acres. We revived some 7 wells with the Mannuwaddar community, and these wells now give 1 lakh liters of water. There are 70 recharge wells, which push in all the flood waters into the aquifer. And the aquifer gives a substantial portion of the water requirement of the park, so it can be done. This is at IIM Bangalore, where there's again recharge wells from the roads and stormwater drains, which pushes the water in. And the aquifer tables are coming up there in IIM Bangalore also. What do we do at the next scale? We talked about parks, institutions, apartments, gated communities, individual homes. Let's look at a watershed, one of the lakes of Bangalore. To the right, the center one is Jakkur Lake, got a catchment of 18.9 square kilometers. The water spread is 50 hectares. How do you deal with urban lakes like that? This is the lake of Jakkur. You'll notice in this figure, those circular things are the sewage treatment plant. It's a 15 million liter per day sewage treatment plant. Just below that is a constructed wetland, and below that is the lake. Yeah, so these are the 3 steps that are needed to get urban wastewater managed better. This is the conventional sewage treatment plant upstream of the lake. As you see, upstream of the lake, all the sewage in the sewage watershed should be collected and treated before it is let into the lake. The sludge in the sewage treatment plant is a great resource. The sewage treatment plants need not be cost zones, they can be revenue zones if the sludge is managed well. These sludge sells for 10,000 rupees a truckload. 2 truckloads a day is generated. 20,000 rupees comes from the sludge itself if it is sold as manure and if it's managed and checked for heavy metal not being there, right? That's the quality of the treated wastewater. Now it's an integrated fixed film system. You see the one on the right. It's very good quality water. Treatment is very nice. Phosphates are also removed, less than 1. It comes into the constructed wetland, right? The treated wastewater comes into the constructed wetland. The constructed wetland is a great biodiversity spot with the river birds, small mammals, reptiles, birds, plants, everything. It cleans up the water further. That's how the constructed wetland looks like. That's the polished water coming in from the constructed wetland into the water body, into the lake, right? And this is how the lake looks like. The lake provides livelihood for fishermen, a fisherman's cooperative. 200 to 250 kgs of fish can be harvested on a daily basis if the lake water is maintained. The fish provides proteins for all the Bengalis and Malayalis in Bangalore and for others who eat fish, and everybody's welcome. You get a Bengali cut, which is in 3 pieces, and mustard oil is recommended with the fish from treated wastewater. It's important that the fishermen also become partners. They make sure that the water hyacinth is removed from the lakes as and when it grows. It's a once in 3-year activity. Water hyacinths are good to remove heavy metals and nutrients, but water hyacinths are bad if they overrun the lake. The fishermen do the job. Right now, they're doing it in Jakkur Lake also. Then the birds return, the pelicans have come back. That's how the lake looks like right now in gorgeous site, Jakkur Lake. It's been replicated in many lakes. Dodupam Sunrise, another lake, and there are 21 lakes where this experiment is going on. It's been replicated. There on the left, you see the painted storks, which used to be migrants. Now they're permanent residents of Bangalore. They have an Aadhaar card, they have a PAN card, and they have voting rights in the local elections. So they can become ward committee members in theory. This is what you want to aim at. You want to make sure that wastewater is treated, lakes are restored, birds come back, biodiversity comes back, as much as possible, coots, purple moorhens, you name it, pelicans, everything, and that the groundwater is restored. So then the wells get full in the surrounding areas. This is now drinking water. Wastewater has been converted to drinking water through a process of conventional treatment and ecology and biodiversity and rehabilitation. I think these are the kind of models that every city will be looking at and will be replicating. All of it in Jakkur Lake is managed by the community, which coordinates between the institutions responsible, right? And this is how the lake looks like right now. It's a gorgeous site, and it's really a treasure for the local community. What do we do with wastewater now, right? So we talked about watersheds, and this is the favorite part of my story. I hope you'll enjoy dinner after what I speak to you. Here's farmer Muniraju. Now, well diggers are part of the solution for water. Fishermen are part of the solution of water. Farmers are also part of the solution for water. What does Muniraju do? He picks up untreated wastewater from the town of Vijaypura, untreated wastewater, into these kind of ponds, allows the water to settle, then pumps it, untreated wastewater, into his field, uses furrow irrigation, not flood irrigation, furrow irrigation, and is growing a lovely crop. It's not non-edible crop. What is this crop? The crop is mulberry. You see acres and acres of mulberry. From the whole Vijaypura town, all the untreated wastewater is consumed by the farmers and converted to mulberry. Lush green fields right throughout the year. Mulberry is a perennial crop. You harvest it every day for 365 days, 366 every leap year. And in that leap year, you feed the silkworms. Not in leap year, you can feed it in every year. And the silkworms are certifiers of the quality of the mulberry leaf. If there's heavy metal or any contaminant in the mulberry leaf, the silkworms will die. So they're not only functionally eating the mulberry leaf and reproducing, but also certifying the quality of the wastewater in the town. And they become cocoons. The cocoons are also very sensitive. They also certify the mulberry leaf. This is how the cocoons look like. The cocoons are woven into yarn and they become saris, and then you have shit to silk. So a farmer and farmers' fields of Vijaypura have transformed untreated wastewater to the beautiful silk saris, the Mysore silk saris, providing livelihoods to weavers, providing livelihoods to farmers, to cocoon rearers, and solving the problem of a town. These kind of compacts, which are informal, need to be formalized to eliminate any health risk or environmental risk and make sure the whole process is safe. Muniraju himself then becomes a rich farmer, has cows now, can send his kids for education. This example of Muniraju is now being followed at a greater scale by the city of Bangalore, where all the treated wastewater from all the sewage treatment plants they have is being shipped to the hinterland, which is drought affected, the districts of Kolar and Chikballapur, subject to climate change. Bangalore has a series of wastewater treatment plants, close to 36 in total now, the numbers have increased in each one of the valleys. The valleys on the right bottom, the brown colored one is KC Valley. Here, the wastewater treatment plants look like this. That's the sewage treatment plant. That's the raw sewage coming in. There's a particular characteristic to the raw sewage. You monitor the parameters and make sure that you achieve treatment levels to meet norms for irrigation. There are norms of treatment which is meant for irrigation. This treated wastewater is now pumped 52 kilometers and starts to fill the lakes of Kolar. 137 lakes are to be filled. Already 100 lakes are full. You can see the one on the left. That's the first lake. Treated wastewater from the city filling the lake. Cascades down in a series of lakes like so. So it goes by gravity, fills up 6 to 7 lakes, then is picked up from the bottommost lake and again pumped to the ridge line. Again, it fills up a lake, set of lakes. So through 5 pumping stations, you fill up 137 lakes. Right? So these are the names of some of the lakes. The treated wastewater is used for washing cattle. Cattle can drink from it now. That's how it looks like when it comes into the first lake, the treated wastewater. A bit of chlorine dosing is done to make sure that there's no bacteria in it. Fishing is allowed in the first lake. The fishing, as I said, is a bioindicator also. Farmers are not allowed to take the wastewater directly. They're allowed only to take it from the groundwater. So the lakes fill the aquifers from open wells and bore wells. You're allowed to take the water, right? And from this aquifer, you can grow edible crops also. With untreated wastewater, you grow mulberry. With treated wastewater, you grow cucumbers and all sorts of plants. And so farmers are now becoming livelihood secure, climate change secure. The city is becoming food secure through the use of wastewater which it has generated. So cities are now becoming water factories and fertilizer factories, providing livelihoods to farmers and securing food security to themselves in an era of climate change through wise use. The last point that I want to discuss, I'm already at 45 minutes. In the next 2 minutes, I hope to finish. This beautiful truck called a honeysucker. It's a vacuum sucking truck which picks up honey from pit toilets and septic tanks, like so. There are more than 500,000 pit toilets and septic tanks in the city of Bangalore. Many towns in India do not have sewage networks. They have pit toilets or septic tanks. The honeysucker comes in, eliminates manual scavenging, is then taken by farmers and they compost it using compost pits. It's lined at the bottom so that there's no groundwater contamination. And in about 8 to 10 months, you have excellent manure, which is then blended with farmyard manure, cow manure, and is used for plants. It sells for 1,500 to 2,000 rupees a tractor load. And then you grow the best fruits. Bananas are great, for example, or grapes, which make wine. So this is shit to wine. If that was shit to silk, this is shit to wine. So again, compacts between farmers and the city, generators of what is called waste, but what's actually a resource for the farmer is something that cities and habitations in India will have to drive at. So if you pay the true ecological price for water, that is when you return it back to nature, the same quality and quantity at which you appropriated it, you can put it through an endless loop and therefore you will not suffer from water scarcity or wastewater scarcity. And so what is the approach that is recommended at a larger scale? Elinor Ostrom, the Nobel Prize winning economist, she suggests the management of the commons. And there are 13 rules according to her. Think about institutions. Always think about the kind of institutions that will deal with a particular problem. Post social change as problem solving. Embrace diversity. Every habitation, every city will be different. But within that, be specific about the solutions, how you will do the partnership. Listen to people, listen to well diggers, listen to fishermen, listen to farmers. Self-government as possible, like the gated communities show and at other scales the farmers are showing. Everything changes. Be prepared for a dynamic world. Map power, because that's what controls everything. Collective ownership can work. It need not be the market and every man or every woman to herself or himself. Human beings are part of nature too. So therefore, think of ecological regeneration as you think of solutions for agriculture and water. All institutions are constructed, so can be constructed differently. So institutions have to be changing rapidly. There are no panaceas, there's no silver bullet. Complexity does not mean chaos. So you've got to deal with complexity and you have to work with complexity, and it's a minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day job, right? Because the only thing we learn from history is that we do not learn from history. Or do we not? It depends on whether you're a Hegelian or not, right? So this is what we have to go through, because the great journey for India and what you guys in S4 are doing and others are doing all across India is a journey of literacy. That is water literacy, environmental literacy, design literacy, planning literacy, all kinds of literacy. And this is a great opportunity for us to provide our skills to find solutions for some of the major problems that confront us, right? So thank you for your patience and for listening to me for so long. And if you have questions and discussions, we'll be happy to take it.
Thank you so much, Vishwanath. I think this is great. We'll open it up for anybody who has any questions, comments, or queries. You can either like mute yourself, or you can also write in the chat box if you don't wish to ask it directly. So
I'm sorry about the small canvas that one had to go through in front of. It's a very small canvas that one had to paint.
So sorry?
I'm sorry about the small canvas that one had to paint.
Hello, sir. I think it was an amazing presentation. It was really eye-opening to see such kind of water systems, which we never think of, I feel. My question was regarding, actually, we are designing for a flood-related area where the same kind of issues where you have a lot of water during floods. It is in Philippines, and you have typhoons, cyclones, everything. But during summers, you don't have water at all. So I was just a bit curious to know, because you have done a lot of research in this, all these systems which you are talking about, will they actually work in the flood regions because you have excessive water there?
So for example, eco-sanitation system, toilets, right? One of the problems in flood affected areas, how do you build toilets? Yeah, in Bihar or Assam, for example, a lot of women and men actually wade into the water and defecate, right? Because there's no place to go. Now you can think of an eco-san toilet, which is on the first floor or in the drawing room itself, right? Yeah. So for 2 to 3 months, when the floodwaters are there, an eco-sand toilet is a solution, right? And it works brilliantly without any problem at all. So you can, so what you do with an eco-sand toilet is you prevented pollution of the water sources nearby. Yeah. Now, if you're able to harvest rainwater and keep, let's say, 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000 liters, your drinking and cooking water is the most essential water. It should be free from contaminants, right? Mm-hmm. If you're able to store that and you're able to ensure that that's what you use for drinking and cooking, then you don't have any cholera, diarrhea, or any diseases, right? The other water you can then filter and use it for bathing, washing clothes, and washing dishes. So all technologies are relevant for all places. You have to fine tune it and make sure that it's adapted.
Okay. So in the terms of the like a house level, like how you were explaining, the roof plays a very important role. And as we were studying, we even realized that. But then there was a bit of a query which I had, like places like typhoons where you have huge winds, you can't actually use your roofs in that manner because everything will flow off. Then how do we use a roof? Do we like make it a cage kind of a thing then?
So what happens is you rebuild, right?
Sorry?
So when you rebuild.
Okay.
So when you make temporary things and they are expected to fly off, right? You fly off, but then you can put it back. All it needs is a tarpaulin to collect rainwater. Yeah. Right? You may not be able to grow food, but if water is essential for you, you just use a tarpaulin and then you start to harvest it. Harvest the rainwater. So you see, the thing is not to find solutions for every problem. I cannot sit around here and give you solutions, right? But to extend the number of solution seekers and be as innovative as possible. And learn from the people themselves, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So, that was amazing.
Yeah. So, I had a question, not a question, but if you could elaborate more on this. So, from what I know, you studied civil engineering and then went on to urban planning, urban regional planning. And so if you could sort of elaborate a bit more about how your role as a urban planner or as a civil engineer has expanded or sort of diversified, but yet has focused on certain things. Something like the fact that you have been involved in policy making also is something very interesting to me. That a civil engineer who has an urban plan has an experience in urban planning is then getting finding a seat in the committee where you're making policy decisions, and how policy decisions will actually make a much larger impact on when you zoom out and look at it from a you zoom out in terms of time. So if you could maybe talk about your experience through finding your role and your space in this existing network.
So it's not, I mean, one can go on this some sort of self-glorification trip, and it's very easy to do that, right? So the thing is that when you find joy and you find a lot of lessons being learned by talking to fishermen, for example, or well diggers, and you say, hey, now what is the role they can play in modern Bangalore? Is there a policy mechanism that can facilitate their livelihoods, right? So then when you have a rainwater harvesting policy to write, who's going to write it? The bureaucrats are struggling. They don't know nothing about rainwater harvesting. They don't know about rainfall patterns. They don't know about geology, hydrogeology, right? But they want some assistance to do it. So they form a committee. Now you've got to be smart enough to become a part of that committee, right? So you have to find a seat at the table. And therefore, for everybody, don't sit around throwing stones at the caravan, become a part of the caravan. Find a seat at the table as much as is possible. Do that not only through your work, but learning from other people's work, sympathizing and learning from what they do, and seeing where their work will fit into a policy pattern where their livelihoods are enhanced, right? For which you have to be a bit objective, in the sense you should not have a stake in the policy being written, a personal stake in it, right? So there must be a generic community stake. So if that is happening, then no single person writes policy, but you're part of a committee, and then there's a lot of persuasion, and a lot of talking, and a lot of dialogue and discussion. But usually these people are looking for experiences from the ground, and those experiences from the ground have to quickly translate themselves upwards. So you design things, you implement things, you learn from people, you communicate that as much as possible, talk about it, find the excitement in your lives, and go ahead and write policy also.
Yeah. So you were saying something?
Nothing. I'm just saying that it's great fun along the way, right? And there's many failures, but it's all great fun.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions, comments?
I have a question. So actually, I wonder, since like currently, if we look at the situation in our country, there is like rapid urbanization happening in peri-urban areas, even rural areas. So from the perspective of water and its conservation, would you say, like when we're talking about urbanization, is it better to is it better to conglomerate densely in existing urbanized areas, or to extend urbanization even to what would be a better strategy to densify existing urban areas, or to spread urbanization even into rural areas in terms of
So Vedanti, that's a difficult one to answer, because it's sort of geography dependent, right? Now, let me give you one example. In urban planning, for long, I studied as an urban planner. The whole model of urban planning has been the workplace to home transportation model, right? So it's a transportation model which drives urban planning. We want to minimize the transportation trip. So we want mass transportation, metros, railways, etc., etc. Therefore, we need density, because unless you have high density, you don't have enough traffic in the mass transportation network. And so increasing density and then the work-home relationship, that's the only model we've had. But suppose the limiting factor for your city is water. Would it make sense to do the same density-driven model everywhere? Suppose the limiting factor is not water. Let's say you have abundant water. Let's say a Mumbai, which has 3,000 millimeters of rain and enough reservoirs. Then it can start to densify and work on that work to home. But a Bangalore wanting to follow that model is a bit crazy. So we need to be innovative, and I think we should look for polynodal forms of development for cities like Bangalore, which could be low-rise, high density or medium density, but which should work on self-sufficiency, right? My dream is something like 100,000 people living in polynodal areas which have everything, all kinds of functions. So therefore, it becomes a replicable kind of thing. But the one-size-fits-all model of urban planning has done a great deal of disservice for us.
Ramya, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, sir. How are you?
Surviving the big bad world.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Ramya.
Yes. No, sir. My question was mostly about challenges at the scale of the individual, at the scale of the neighborhood, and at the scale of the city. What challenges have you faced in kind of getting people to put in this much effort? Because it does need people to put in their money and to put in their effort and to actually believe in these processes in a long term. So what challenges have you faced?
So Ramya, the challenge is one of conversation, is of narrative building, is of persuading people to become part of a journey in which they benefit as much as anybody else, right? So for example, in Rainbow Drive, it's a series of conversations over years before the community realized what it could do, what its potential was. And eventually they did it themselves, right? In Jakkurle, it was they who had to figure out what the potential of. There's something called integrated urban water management in my head because I had the luxury and the privilege of an urban planning study, so I knew what the hell that was. But to a whole bunch of laypersons who were busy going around a walk on their lake and were aghast at solid waste being dumped or sewage entering it, IUWM doesn't matter. What matters to them is that it should be a clean place for their kids to go around. But as they then invest themselves as a community and you grow a community and you allow other people to take leadership, they take decisions, and then you just keep on informing them of the greatness of their goal, right? So you are the vision guy. You're talking to them saying, hey, look, you guys are on a journey which is wonderful, which is the world's best, right? So you have to sell that narrative, right? And then they take great pride at it. Similarly, at a city scale, right? When you have to transfer large volumes of wastewater outside for filling agricultural land, how does that happen? If one minister, like the agriculture minister, takes championship of it because he's done it in Jakkur, now he sees the potential for it for Kolar, right? 400. Then you have one of the second largest projects in the world for agricultural reuse of treated wastewater. Right? So it's all about storytelling. It's all about narrative building. It's getting people, persuading people, and enjoying an old monk on the end of a Friday to console yourself when things don't work out, right? So this is the way it works. It's not one individual's journey. It's not one institution's journey. It's a collective journey. And that's what is very significant about it. How are you doing, Ramya?
Fine, sir. Thank you.
Good to see you after a long time.
Yeah, saw some familiar images in your presentation.
I have a question. Aman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, sir, this is Krishna. I'm also from compartment S4, and I have more of a comment or a reflection or a comment. I don't know what do you call it. So we had this FNC 2 weeks ago where we were talking about how water as a resource, there are a lot of injustices that happen in the way this resource is treated, because right now it is sort of looked at as capital. And just like land, how there are a lot of injustices in the way land is divided, or there is access to land. In the same way, there are a lot of injustices to the way there is access to water. So in my city, let's say for example, where I live, I get water 24/7, and I don't have to think of how and from where I'm getting that water. But just behind my community, there is another community which doesn't have that access to water. And for me, rainwater harvesting systems are like, okay, yes, so I can make a rainwater harvesting tank because I have that investment to make. But I cannot propose the same solution for the community that is living just behind me, because they cannot afford that solution. So then, like, what do you do in this case where, you have the solutions, but you don't, like, the communities cannot afford, or they don't have the access to those solutions?
So here's the thing. What we need is democratization of water decisions, right? What we need is at every ward committee level, for people to get together and ask how many households are there in the ward, how many of them are connected to the pipe network, and how many of them are connected to the sewage network, and set themselves a goal for universal connection, right? So 100% of the households should be connected to water supply and to sanitation, right? That should be the way we should work with it. Some water for all, not all water for some. But what happens in urban India is that you and me get subsidized water. And because we get subsidized water, the institution which provides the water is broke. It cannot extend its services to the poor, where it should extend its services. Ideally, the poor should be connected to piped water network, and you and me should be dependent on rainwater, right? Because we have the monies to harvest rainwater, right? So we should be dependent on rainwater. We should not take piped water, and we should give that piped water to the poor, right? That should be the philosophy that we should occupy. But there is no point just berating injustices, right? We have to figure a way out through the mess. And the way out through the mess is by identifying the right problem. For long, cities have been made evil creatures which are taking away the resource from a hinterland, right? Somehow their cities are depriving rural areas of water and doing injustice. Not so. Cities are excellent and efficient users of water. So the resource is not the key issue. Distribution is. The focus should be distribution all the time. This focus should be eliminating inequity, right? But by focusing on the resource itself, we're taking away the telescope or the lens from the real issue, which is that the poor don't have access to water. And that will need for many more people to become aware of it and find solutions. Rainwater harvesting for the rich, groundwater for the rich, but pipe network, good clean pipe water, 24/7 pipe water, good clean sanitation for the poor. That's my political speech.
It makes sense though, the way you put it, where you say that, you have to talk about distribution and not about the resource as a limited resource, but talk about the way it's distributed and how there is equity in distribution.
Right. And we always shirk away from finances, right? We don't want to talk about the true cost of water. We don't want to pay the true cost of water. We don't ask whether the institution providing the water is bankrupt or has enough monies to invest. What we have done in India is we have bankrupted all our water supply institutions. So they're dependent on a begging ball to the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Japanese International Bank, and only then they're able to invest in physical infrastructure. Unless we make them financially robust and then set a democratic goal of universal coverage, only then will we be able to overcome the social injustices. See, even in wastewater, they want treated wastewater to go to industries. It's a big fight now in the water policy, wastewater policy, to say no, agriculture should have the first fight. Industry should have the last fight. Because informally, farmers are dependent on it and they may not be able to pay. But because it's nutrient rich, if farmers get it, they'll be able to make it really productive. Do by all means give it to industries, but don't think of it as the only way that you can use wastewater, right? So it's not just water alone. Even in wastewater, there are injustices. But yeah, you had a hand up. Somebody else had a hand up.
Kushal Jaju has a question. Kushal, do you want to unmute yourself and ask yourself?
Yeah, I would like to rearrange the question. Like maybe, what could be the probable ways that, this could be extended and tried to take to other cities and towns of the nation? Because what you've been talking about Bangalore as a city and, the region. So what, and also what has been the set of issues that, somewhere restricts the whole idea of practicing this. But I can see there is a certain awareness and sense of that, but still that is not executed, the way it should be at ground level.
So the thing is, Kaushal, it's happening in many towns and cities. We've not documented it enough. I'll just give you one example. That's a small town called Tumkur, which is 80 kilometers from Bangalore, which is about 4 lakh population, right? And the wastewater in Tumkur is being used by the farmers to grow a medicinal crop called Baje. It's a very rich medicinal crop, and in 250 acres, they consume all the wastewater from Tumkur town and convert it to this really good crop, and they make lots of money out of it, right? So that's an example in which the decision makers of Tumkur are not able to see the farmers and not include them as part of the solution. So Tumkur has to get that dialogue going and get that problem sorted out. Chennai is now planning for treated wastewater to fill the lakes, like I showed you in Jakkur, and then use it for drinking water formally. In Bangalore, it's still used informally, the groundwater which is recharged, the aquifer which is recharged. In Chennai, they want to do it formally. See, many cities in India will be the exemplars for what should be done and what possibilities are. And it will be the richer cities, which are the more experimental cities, which will show the way out. By the time it reaches the Indo-Gangetic plain, it will take us some 10, 15 years, right? But that's the way things are. It will have to flow from examples which we see, and then we are able to absorb economically, right? So a robust city like Bangalore, which is tons of money, which is a powerhouse of a GDP, should be wise enough to invest it in showing examples which can be followed by other towns and other cities. Plus the masala dosa here is great, man. And therefore, we have some excellent solutions. Kaushal, learn to make good masala dosa and you'll find solutions in every town, or aloo paratha or whatever.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a question if we are still not running out of time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. Since you've laid out the whole picture of what it is, what is the state right now in Bangalore, what do you think are the new, how you have revolved your practice around water in at so many stages? Like if someone wants to think about their practice, what should be the mode of practice to start communicating or start addressing such issues, and at what scale? Like, do you think assessment is one scale? Do you think, like, where should a new practice start intervening? Like, what are the new modes of practicing with water in the urban? Like,
So,
if you
Nishita,
can shed light.
yeah, sure. So there's the Stephen Covey model, right? So there's a zone of concern and a zone of influence, right? So the bigger square is the zone of concern, and the smaller square is the zone of influence. As our practice matures, as we have more experience and more years, our zone of influence starts to extend, right? So first we have to focus on the zone of influence and do the maximum that can be done in that zone of influence. If you're designing a building, you're designing an apartment, you're designing a community, that's what you focus on. But when you're designing that, you ask yourself the bigger question as to what's happening with that component in the outer areas, right? So if you're, let's say, designing for rainwater harvesting, ask what's happening at the city scale. Is the city dealing with rainwater harvesting? If not, why not, right? If you're dealing with wastewater, ask what the city is doing with it as you continue on your practice. And as you build your knowledge on the bigger environment, and as you build your skills in your area of influence, you'll have a good time of 20 years down the line, 25 years down the line. It's just a question of time and interest, like, and energy that you put in.
I have a question if there's still time.
Yeah, sure.
Sir, you talked about how the way out through the mess comes from identifying the correct problem or identifying the problem correctly. And I wondered if you had any stories to share about what happened from identifying the problem incorrectly.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll just give you an example. So the Niti Aayog went to town and said Bangalore is running out of water by 2020, right? So promptly the government of Karnataka drew up a 10,000 crore scheme to get water from a dam 420 kilometers away called Hinterland. And is now running with that project because, you know what, Niti Aayog and BBC said that the city is running out of water. Whereas the city is not running out of water, the city is running out of distribution networks and not getting water to everyone. So you compound a problem by putting in place a project which is terribly expensive and terribly economically, ecologically destructive because the problem has been identified wrongly.
I actually meant if you had any personal stories where you might have identified a problem incorrectly and what happened after
Me,
that.
again, that's a long list. That's a 1 hour talk at least. You know? So let me just sort of moderate that and just give you one example, right? So one of the villages where we built rainwater harvesting tanks, the first set we built 6 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet tanks, right? 6,000 liters in rural Kolar, 80 kilometers away. So the first rains, the tanks filled up. The women were very happy. There was very striking lack of water. 6,000 liter tank full at the doorstep, open a tank, water, man, nothing like that for the women. They would phone up. 1 year down the line, none of the tanks were getting used. So you went and asked why. And the women said, because the tanks have not been cleaned. The question was, you don't need to clean the tanks. No, you need to clean the tanks. If you don't clean tanks, we can't use the water. That's the mindset they had, right? But it's 6 feet high. We can't climb up and clean the tanks. We tell our men to clean the tanks. They don't clean the tanks. So therefore, we don't use the water. So the next set of tanks were designed at 3.5 feet high so that women could clean the tanks and then the water could be used. So the problem is not a technical problem. It's an acceptance problem. It's an end user problem. It's a consumer problem. And unless you have dialogues and work out those solutions, you are stuck with a solution which is a huge tank in front of every house not being used. Just one example. I mean, the errors, if I do a PPT, then it will take me another 1 hour. Riddled with mistakes. You never talk
have
about
another session for that.
Yeah, never talk about your failures, Shiraja. Only talk about them.
Oh, this is very interesting.
Yeah. Ajar failures.
Thank you so much.
I think we can close it here if there are no other questions.
Yeah. So just the last line, Aman.
Sure.
At the bottom, what I figure out is that water and sanitation is a gender issue. And it's the gender lens. And I teach at the college and at the university now, and I figure it out. And I think that we haven't paid enough attention from a design and planning perspective as to what does it mean from a gender and patriarchy point of view, right? So I would urge all of you who are listening in, use the lens, figure that out, and I think we'll be 95% of the way there in solving a problem. We haven't even defined it from that perspective at all. Okay, those are profound words. Friday evening, go get yourself a break. And
so that was very insightful and gives us a lot to think about. Yeah, I think we can end it on this note. Thank you so much, Vishwanath, for doing this. We're very glad to have you here, and we hope to, be in touch and and hope that more and more people work towards this. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And
hey, thank you for the patience and for listening. Right, so from my side.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.